So, Mr. Minister, Turkey maintains very good business relations and with many partners all over the world. But what are particularities of Turkish relations to Ukraine? What are the particular opportunities which probably would differ for particularly the country which is a neighbor? And
well, Ukraine and Turkey have special relationship. Partly that's to do with, of course, being a neighbor. That's important. But partly also is to do with these historic contexts, connections, like Crimea, Tatars. So that's another connection. Thirdly, increasingly, both countries are becoming important trading partners. And economies that partially are complementary to each other. I mean, there are exceptions, but so therefore, Turkey has this strategic, very friendly trade, investments, but also relations that goes deeper than that. So bottom line is we have special relations with Ukraine. That's not going to change. In fact, our political relations are excellent.
And, you have this kind of a rapprochement, the better relations with Russia after the pretty long conflict. We know the reasons. Usually they are economic. It's tourism, agriculture, some problems with even particular smaller industries. But from here, does it look like that Turkey is so pragmatic that it doesn't care about the political relations, about its allies? We are looking at the Crimean Tatars, about annexation of Russia, but is Turkey just about the, doing business, disregarding all that things?
No, that's not true. First of all, what has happened is normalization of relations with Russia. So essentially, following the downing of the Russian plane, there was a complete freeze, there was a complete disconnect with Russia. I don't think that's a sustainable type of relationship between any neighbors. Turkey and Russia have been neighbors for almost 1,000 years. And I think it's important that in our region that we maintain good dialogue, some sort of normal relationship. So that's first. Secondly, no relationship between one country with another one is basically alternative to another relationship. So while we're maintaining strong focus on Ukraine and we strongly support Ukrainian territorial integrity, we would like to continue to enhance dialogue with our entire neighborhood. Because if neighborhood is in more sort of peaceful, stable shape, I think everybody benefits from it. So our normalization with Russia, relationship with Russia, is not an alternative to our good relations with Ukraine. I think it's very clear.
It's already 2 years, after 2 years of a pretty good peace talks regarding the Kurdish issue in Turkey, we still already have, escalation. We have people being killed. Turkey's participating in the campaigns in Syria and Iraq. And some people would say it's one of the top issues in Turkey. So what is their government policy this? It's like getting, trying to not to have more extremists, detaining, like doing things with the force, or what is the current government policy in this regard?
Well, first of all, Turkey does not have a quarrel with Kurds anywhere. Ethnically, I'm a Kurd, and I'm a deputy prime minister of Turkey. We were the first country to extend support to Iraqi Kurdistan regional government to fight ISIS. We provided both military support as well as we provided the financial support to fight ISIS in Mosul, in Kirkuk, in northern Iraq. We helped Iraqi Kurds. Similarly, with Syrian Kurds, we have no quarrel. They're our brothers. What we have quarrel with is PKK. PKK is a terrorist organization, is on the list of terrorist organizations of EU, United Nations, and United States. PKK wants to carve out a piece of land from Turkey. We think the future of Kurds in Turkey is in more prosperous, more democratic, more tolerant Turkey as a nation, not new states based on ethnic or sectarian lines. That type of future for Middle East is chaotic future, meaning trying to divide countries along sectarian, along ethnic lines, that has no limits. It actually invitation for perpetual conflict. And that's why we are combating PKK, which is a terrorist organization, but we are continuing to expand our democratic standards and fundamental rights and freedoms of Kurds, everybody else, all the ethnic groups in Turkey. So therefore, actually my government, over the last decade and a half, has pushed so many reforms. If PKK was genuinely interested in the rights of Kurds, in the future of Kurds, normally you would have expected violence to subside. We had this reconciliation process. But unfortunately, PKK exploited that process. They armed more, they recruited more militants, and they actually prepared the ground for today's violent backlash. So we, as I said, as a country, Middle East, overall, the future is more like a European model as opposed to the current model. The European model is this, UK, not excluding UK. EU has today 28 member states, maybe hundreds of ethnic groups, maybe different sectarian religious groups. But Europe is a success story. Why? Because it merged on common values, human values, universal values, fundamental rights and freedoms, rule of law, and enhanced standards of democracy. And that's why Europe is more prosperous, is more successful. The Middle East, Turkey, the same rule applies. And the only issue with the Kurds, not with the Kurds, with PKK that claims to represent Kurds, should be taken within that context.
The other thing is, so we're trying hard. Of course, at this stage, we understand that the majority of Turkish people didn't support the attempt coup d'etat. At the same time, after we following closely, there were numerous arrests, there were reports on the detention of the journalists, even like tortures in the prisons, and we're speaking about 1,000 people. And even like some advice not to communicate a lot with the Western partners for the academians. You're like somebody who worked in the United Kingdom, somebody who considered to be liberal. What is your answer? Because that just doesn't look that sometimes this answer looks disproportional.
Well, first of all, you mentioned a few things. So let me clarify. We have zero tolerance to torture, zero tolerance. So even against perpetrators of a violent coup, we will adhere democratic standards, we will apply rule of law. So that's no question. I just want to make it clear. Secondly, as far as people who are under arrest, those people are under arrest because they were either involved directly in the violent coup attempt or part of this secretive network, and it's proven with the evidence. So it is not like, trying to get rid of the opposition. It's not a heavy-handed approach. This is not an ordinary event. On July 15th, basically, a group of armed forces supported by judiciary, supported by media outlets of this secretive religious cult, basically they try to destroy democracy, they try to destroy rule of law. But we will still apply rule of law. What has happened since then, of course, any country would have gone after those who were either complicit in the coup attempt or perpetrator of coup attempt. It's only natural that you do that. But we are still subject to European Court of Human Rights rulings. We still apply that rules. So I just want to make that clear. Secondly, this noise. It is tough. Anyway, so my point is this. This religious cult, since 1970s, has been infiltrating in various government agencies, including the army, including the judiciary, including the police. But not only that, it's also a big business group. It has bank, it has lots of media outlets, it has lots of universities. It has almost 1,000 colleges and university prep schools. This movement operates in 170 countries. But in the case of Turkey, they wanted to grab the power through a coup attempt. So just imagine, you live in Kiev. If you had a group that attacked your parliament with F-16s, I don't know which sort of airplanes you have, with attack helicopters, with the tanks, killed more than 240 innocent civilians, injured 2,200 of them on a critical fashion, and tried to sort of get rid of a legitimate, democratically elected government. How would you respond? This is a criminal activity. Of course you would go after them. You would want to make sure that this never ever happens again. But in doing so, as I said, zero tolerance for torture and upholding rule of law. Why? Because Turkey is an EU accession candidate. Turkey is a member of Council of Europe, and Turkey has accepted superiority of international law over its own domestic legislation. And that's why European Court of Human Rights rulings will apply. All these people who've been sacked from government because of being either complicit with the coup or either being part of this illegal network, based on evidence that we have, will have a full recourse back to judiciary when needed. And if we've made mistakes, we'll rectify it.